today my guest is Chef Christopher Tanner. He's the Executive Director of the American Culinary Federation. So thank you so much for joining me, Chef. I really appreciate having you here.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was hoping you could just start a little bit with your background. I know you've done a lot of jobs as a chef and working for commercial food companies as well, and kind of talk about your journey up to what led you to finally becoming the Executive Director of the ACF.
Yeah, I've had a very interesting background that kind of spans over all portions of our industry. So I'm originally from upstate New York. I went to Schenectady County Community College. I grew up in restaurants, culinary background. My family's on the half my family's German, so kind of grew up in the German diner setting, and kind of like a lot of us, inspired by our grandparents and cooking. And I went to a culinary school in upstate New York, Schenectady County Community College. Finally, in my I think I turned 21 the first semester in culinary school, because I'd been working in restaurants already. And I'm like, oh, do I need to go to culinary school? Well, yes, I need to go to culinary school. And that's where I discovered the American Culinary Federation too. So my first semester, I saw that we had a competition team. We were an ACF accredited school at Schenectady County Community College. And I ended up joining the competition team. I also was president of the student chapter at the Capital District Central New York chapter, and kind of got that in my system as I went along. Worked through restaurants for a number of years. After graduating from culinary school, I worked for Disney at the Flying Fish Cafe. Worked in New Orleans at Bayona. Worked in restaurants across the country. Eventually realized I needed to get a bachelor's degree after moving all over the country, and I ended up going to SUNY Delhi for my bachelor's degree. Many people know about that school. It's a great program. Honestly, for me, my credits all transferred because it was in the SUNY system, so it made it kind of easy. And that was where I ended up really getting into competition. Tom Resinella, who was the head of the program there, got me into competition, and I ended up competing at Boston University, one of the kitchens there, and found their master's degree program there. And it's gastronomy and food studies, which sounds like it's food science, but it's not. It's history and sociology of food. So I kind of felt where I started off, and you go to culinary school to learn how to cook. I got the BBA at SUNY Delhi, so I learned how to make money cooking. The gastronomy degree kind of made me understand why we eat what we eat and what gets us passionate about it. So finished up the degree there. I did all my classes in 2 semesters. I really suggest not to do that. It was a stressful year, but I got through it. But grad school was expensive, so I didn't want to take more than 2 semesters. Ended up teaching at Schenectady County Community College. This is my alma mater. My plan was to be there 1 semester, finish my thesis, and then move on. 4 years later, I had my CEC, CCE. I was an ACF culinary judge. I had started a competition team at the school. Helped a lot of my mentors actually get their certifications as well. Started a huge competition where we had over a weekend, 150 competitors over a weekend. Mentored a student to win the Northeast Region Student Chef of the Year for the ACF, and literally, it took me 4 years to find and write my thesis. Literally within a month of writing my thesis, 2 schools asked me to be the director of their programs. I ended up going to Montgomery County Community College, built a whole new program for them, built a whole new facility for them. And I hate to say this, good, both bad. A few months before we were going to open up the campus, I ended up getting a call from Campbell's Soup Company. A friend of mine was the VP of Culinary at Campbell's. He was looking to elevate culinary at the company. Certified Master Chef Tom Griffiths. I ended up going to an ACF chapter meeting. This is where networking is very important. That's why I think the ACF, so I had all the credentials and everything, but at the end of the day, knowing someone opens a lot of doors, so you got to have that baseline. But I ended up going to an ACF chapter meeting there, and he said, do you want a job? I said, I'm doing good where I am. And they said, why don't you come by and talk to some people? 6 months later, I was working at Campbell's. So I ended up overseeing the Americas division for Campbell's Soup. So a lot of people think of Campbell's Soup as just being a soup company. It's not just soup. It's also paste salsa, it's Prego, Swanson, Plum baby food. And then I eventually got promoted after 3.5 years to director of the culinary for Global Biscuits and Snacks. So in the U.S., that's we moved up to Connecticut. So that's Pepperidge Farm and Arnott's in Australia, and then Kelsen was in Denmark. I moved around different companies after being with the company for 5 years. We ended up going to Chicago, where I was with Griffith Foods, which is a flavoring manufacturing company. A lot of people know them as custom culinary as well, especially in the ACF realm. But also, you don't realize that you're eating half their products every day. You just don't realize that you're actually getting it, because it's in a lot of the quick service restaurants, or if you go to Costco, there's a number of products that are there that they work on as well. And then about, let's say 3 years ago, I actually, so my family lives down here in Florida, a lot of them. So it's about 3 years ago, I got a call from a company called Dairy Fair Foods, now Rubik's Foods. They asked me if I was willing to come down here and help them build their culinary team up to be a different level for food service. Also help out with their marketing and sales, and just kind of leading them to a different level where they're going. I was with them for 2 years. Absolutely loved the company. Launched some amazing products that a lot of you have also probably eaten. That I can't talk about it, but you probably had a lot of the stuff that my team worked on. But about a year ago, a lot of changes here happened in national office, and I happened to be living here in Jacksonville, Florida, where Dairy Fair Food became that Rubik's Food Company, and because the ACF kind of was a foundation for so much of my career. I've been a member for 28 years now. I saw the opportunity to give back and to help build careers and help build all those things that I've got in my career. So if you really look at my career, I've gone everywhere from education to hotels and restaurants to commercial food manufacturing. Here I just saw as an opportunity to build more of that long career into other people's careers here too at the ACF. So I've been here a year now, and we're changing and doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, I just noticed your anniversary is right around this time.
It was 7 days, no, 11 days ago.
Yeah. Well, we meaning I and a lot of other people who are members of the ACF were very happy that you stepped in, and with your background, and I know it's a long road. There's a lot of stuff that you want to do with the ACF, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But at Campbell's or Rubik's, I know you did a little research and development. Was that sort of food science or testing of products?
A little of everything. So I often joke, and I have no idea why. When I got to Campbell's, like, why am I even here, and why did I get hired? So, because I had to learn so much on the job. So, but what I loved about my job at all three, so Campbell's, Rubik's, and Griffith, is I wasn't just an application chef. A lot of it was food science based. So I had to learn what a retort system was when I went to Campbell's. So, or hot fill. So retort is 260 degrees in a can, cooking for 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the size of the vessel. Sometimes 2 hours if it's to get those really the number 10 cans. And a lot of people say, it's cook step. It's not cook step. It's a kill step. It's killing all the bacteria and all the botulism potentially in there. So I had to learn all good food practices when I was at Campbell's to be able to do that. So, and then you go over to Prego. Acidified hot filled products, same thing with paste salsa. We did aseptic products with Swanson. So I had to learn a lot of that process, because when you and I think about cooking, at the end of the day, we get to saute things, we get to braise things, we get to do a lot of those different things. But particularly in a canned product, you don't get to do a lot of that. But I still want that flavor, so I had to learn about flavors, natural and artificial flavors. We never used artificial flavors. That kind of went out as soon as I got there. But I got the joy of working with companies like Givaudan, IFF, Simrise. If I want to saute flavor, I'm not going to saute the meat. I got to add a flavor to that, and then find the right meat to actually put in there too. So one of my favorite products I came up with was a pulled pork soup for chunky. And at the end of the day, you can't get pulled pork, so what do you got to work? So I worked with a company that helped actually bring in with ACF as well, Clements Food Group, to have this product that would actually, in that kill step, that retort system, would shred like pulled pork. And then as a chef, as I looked at it, I said, okay, this is where I put my chef hat on. I don't want to put made with liquid smoke to put that liquid smoke flavor on there. Like, as a chef, I realized smoked paprika tastes better, and I put that in all my barbecue rubs. So I put smoked paprika in there to regulate that flavor. So that science and culinary really, I think, got to play really well there. So I learned a lot of that on the job, but I also learned a lot about marketing at the same time. So as we did variety sorts, a lot of the times in the past, they would just look at allrecipes.com or whatever they happen to see on Food and Wine, and that really wasn't what I knew that would be successful in the market. So I got to spend a lot of time with the marketing group and be able to do that too. And then also go all the way to the end and go to Walmart or to Hannaford or a number of different companies and bring it and show it to the market and show the application work to it too. So I got to do pretty much the whole gamut there, and there's no difference between what I did there in Griffith Foods and Rubik's Foods as well. It just I became more of an expert as.
So are you involved in the science of, when you're canning foods, and it seems like, particularly with the chef background, there are some types of foods that lend themselves well to that really long cooking time that is required to kill the bacteria down. And there are some foods where I think it'd be quite difficult to maintain the flavor and the unique, the freshness kind of tasting of it. So how do you approach the food science in terms of how far, what temperature, for what length of time for particular foods, so that you know that it's going to be food safe, but also you're not going to destroy the flavors?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So talking about keeping on that soup story there, if you look at the plastic containers, so consumers will tell you that they don't want it, they don't want to see things in cans. They want to see something in opaque, something they could see through. So if you look at the a plastic container that might go through retort, it actually has to cook longer. Rather than a shorter period of time, because there's that lack of conductivity that goes in a plastic container versus a metal container. Same thing with a glass container. So those were a lot of things I had to think about when I was putting the different products that are in there. There's certain things that don't, anything green does not go into a retort product because it comes out brown. And there's certain things that cook for too long will have musky flavors that come out of it too. So it did limit a lot of the times what ingredients we'd want to be able to put in there again, but that's where we leaned on those natural flavors or natural colors to help out with some of that too. And honestly, at the same time, I also worked with some of the food scientists who believed that they needed to put potassium chloride in a product because we were trying to do low sodium. I said, well, why don't we work with spices or herbs or something like that? And not all of them worked either, because especially with the spices, some of them, when they have that long retort cook, again, we're just talking about the Campbell experience, they're going to come out that musky, horrible flavor. So you just got to, it limits, depending on what packaging you're working on, does limit the flavor profiles. And also, as I'll tell you, consumer preference too. Consumers will tell you they like mushrooms, they don't like mushrooms. We worked on mushroom varieties for Prego, and we put all kinds of mushrooms and chunks of mushrooms into it and mushroom flavors. At the end of the day, most of those sauces were mushroom-ish.
So with salt, I mean, I know potassium is going to give more of a bitter flavor, and you can't use too much of
Yes.
it.
I'm particularly susceptible to it too, so I hate potassium
Yeah.
chloride.
And there are also certain foods, like anchovies, for example, where you associate the smell of the food with saltiness, so you can use less salt and still have the perception of saltiness. So do you tricks like that to try to limit the amount of salt without really sacrificing on the flavor?
Yeah, so soy sauce, especially dehydrated soy sauce, can do that too, and you got an umami flavor. So I mentioned mushrooms just a minute ago. So using mushroom powders for that umami flavor is going to help with some of that satiation flavor too. That's going to go in there too. So there are different things you can play beyond just using. So MSG is another one. So and you want to, MSG was going to come out of our products years ago. So adding mushroom in there, mushroom powders or different things. The problem is they cost more. So you also have to know your threshold of what product you're going to be able to be able to put some of those products into, because consumers will tell you at the end of the day that they want to get rid of certain ingredients, but they also, I'll use Trix as an example. I don't know if you remember Trix. They took the artificial colors out of it, and then they put natural colors into it, and then everyone's like, oh, they look terrible. So they put the artificial colors back in, and then realized that the customer. So design to consumer value is a phrase that a lot of people in the industry will hear. A lot of our chefs in the restaurants or hotels will not hear that very much, but I try to talk to them about that and realize that. So you may think that a bay leaf needs to go into this product, but the consumer doesn't even know that the bay leaf's in there at the end of the day. So if you don't want to keep bay leaves in your kitchen, take them out, because it's that much of flavor. I call it like a symphony. You got 45 pieces of 45 instruments that are playing. You got 4 trumpets playing. If I take out 2 of the trumpets, are they going to miss it? You or I might miss it because we know the difference, but the majority of consumers aren't going to notice those 2 trumpets.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I mean, bay leaves are confusing to lots of people, and they're very subtle, as you know. So I think if you're making a consommé or something that has a very subtle flavor, then it can make a difference. But if you're making a stew, at the end of the day, there's so much going on in there, you're never going to know.
one bay leaf
Yeah.
doesn't make that much of a difference. Maybe if I threw 10 or 20 in, but also that's not going to taste good either.
Yeah, and you mentioned MSG, and clearly that's going to be driven by consumer perception of MSG. I'm curious if Campbell, because Campbell started using MSG, I think in like the 1930s, right?
Oh, yeah.
And has Campbell's done any work to try to change consumer perception and really educate people about what it is, or is it just so difficult to do it wasn't a fight worth fighting?
So you bring up a very good point, and we talked about it on a regular basis. It's very difficult to educate the consumer, particularly once they've got something stuck in their head. So the whole MSG myth came about, I believe I want to say I don't remember the exact year, but there was an article that was written in the New York Times by a food editor and talked about going to a Chinese restaurant, and they couldn't figure out why they all got sick. And they put it to MSG was the thing that there was a common ingredient that they thought that got them all sick. At the end of the day, they probably just got food poisoning. But this myth kept going on it, and people just kind of stuck with it. And unfortunately, I would say the flavor industry never really has educated anyone. The MSG industry is really never educated, or when they did, they tried too late. And then this perception's already there. But at the end of the day, so many people don't realize that they're eating MSG every single day. If you eat anything in that snack aisle, you're eating MSG. MSG is in anything from Doritos to popcorn to all number of different ingredients that are there. There's a very small portion of the population, and actually, as you probably realize, and most of the people that are in the food science industry realize, there's a very small population of people that are susceptible to MSG, just like there is with gluten as well. But it's just gotten such a bad rap and the industry hasn't done enough to educate people on that it would cost so much money to re-educate people that you just find the value's not there.
It was the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was a Chinese doctor who was the one that wrote looking for, I've noticed this thing, and I don't know if it's from the wine or the soy sauce or the MSG, and he was just trying to get help with, have other people found this? And then a bunch of scientists, including some respected scientists, jumped in and wrote these horrible, the science was terrible. And I think it was in 1968. And I found an article from 10 years later from a Chicago Tribune that is just unbelievable, the things that were rich and the racism in it, and just the quotes from doctors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember it was in the 60s or I was going to say 60s or 70s. I'm glad you knew that a little bit better than I do, but there was so I think unfortunately there was a lot of racism that went behind that
absolutely.
as well, and we haven't been able to fix it, because it's not because of that we haven't been able to fix it. It's just because it's hard to get past consumers' perceptions.
Yeah. And glutamates are one of the main amino acids in proteins, and so we're eating lots of glutamates. And as you know, tomatoes. You mentioned mushrooms, soy sauce. There's cheese. There's all kinds of foods that are very rich in glutamates. And so even if you don't have MSG in foods, you're still eating. It's the same molecule. Your body can't distinguish a glutamate molecule or amino acid from one source versus another.
Well, it's like trans fats, and trans fats obviously in excess and putting them in on food on purpose is not good for any of our bodies. But trans fats happen naturally during the baking process of a lot of products. So when they went to outlaw trans fats, they realized, we can't actually outlaw it because it just happens naturally as well.
Yeah, there are very small amounts of trans fats, not even just in baking, but just found naturally in foods. But it's a very, very small amount. And food labeling law says that I think if it's less than half of a gram, you don't have to.
And that was the smart science behind it.
But we know that trans fats definitely are very bad for us, so we do want to limit how much we're eating of them. But you're going to get a little bit.
No, but my dad thought promise was the thing that was going to save the world back in the 80s.
Yeah, there's lots of foods like that, and our bodies are basically dealing with all kinds of poisons of all sorts, and muons from the sun and all kinds of stuff constantly, and our bodies are pretty good at dealing with that. So a little bit of most things. And there's also there's something called hormesis, where a little bit of something that's bad for you is often actually good for you, and it's when it gets above a certain threshold. And you mentioned the people who are sensitive in MSG, and it's there's only one study that has shown any credibility in MSG at all, and it's only in people who are self-reporting sensitivity, and even among those people, it's very small. And it's only if they have a very large amount on an empty stomach, and it's a transient effect as well. So even if they do have a bunch of MSG, way more than anyone would eat, and especially on an empty stomach, you're not going to just drink a glass of MSG.
It's interesting you say that, though. So when I started at Griffith Foods, we worked on a chicken coating for a particular fast food restaurant, and they had MSG was in the coating system that went on there, and I tasted it. I'm like, I absolutely love this, but I absolutely hate it at the same time. And it had too much MSG in it, so it had this, like, it makes you want to enjoy it, which is good, but it also has a flavor profile to it when it gets too high. But nothing happened to me whatsoever.
No, it definitely does. MSG is really interesting, and there are other related compounds as well. You can take a corn chip and sprinkle MSG or guanolates on it, and it will taste like a Dorito. But the other interesting thing about MSG is that it tricks our bodies into thinking that we're getting more protein than we are. And so people will eat more of that food. And companies know this fact, which is part of the reason they put MSG in, to make them more addicted to the foods so that they'll eat more of it because their body is not getting the protein requirements, and they think that this is going to do it subconsciously.
Yeah, as we used to call it, a certain company, craveability.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could talk for hours about this stuff. It's really fascinating, and it's great to talk to someone who's been actually worked for one of these big companies in the thick of it, and it's a fascinating area.
Well, I think what's interesting here now, so being in the office here at ACF, I'm still friends with everyone at the RCA, Research Chef Association. So an organization that kind of came out of the ACF originally, and Charles Hayes is a very good friend of mine. He's the current president for RCA, and we're creating more of those relationships again and bringing us back together. And so, to bring it full circle, as a member of ACF, we're trying to bring some of that RCA knowledge here, the food science knowledge, to the ACF as well, because it's another career field, another career option. But also, I think that the education carries over to both sectors. So you've got modernist cuisine sitting behind you, arguably, one of the most scientific culinary books that have been out there for chefs, at least, but makes it very approachable for chefs to understand why we cook the things that we do, rather than just saying, hey, I know that it tastes good when I put something into it.
Yeah, and Nathan and Harold McGee and people like that who write these books, it's so important, and I really hope that we can create a world where more of that is taught in culinary schools. When I went to the CIA for my culinary, and the food science there was just terrible. I mean, I hate to slam them because it's a great school in many ways, but that's an area where. And when I went through baking and pastry school, which was at a different school, it wasn't as bad, but still there's just a lot of misinformation. And when I've worked in the chef world, same thing, there's just a lot of bad information that's passed down. And so for organizations like the ACF, I'd be interested in hearing what you're doing to try to encourage people to seek out this information. And these books can be a little intimidating. They're very expensive for one thing. A lot of chefs aren't going to be able to afford a $500 set of books like this, much less read the whole thing. But there's some really important things that I think can be retaught to chefs about food science and food safety.
So it's interesting. You bring me back to a school. So I was building the program for Montgomery Community College years ago, and what I really wanted to do at the end of the day is I wanted to contextualize all the gen ed requirements for the culinary arts students. So instead of taking a general chemistry class, I wanted a food science class for the students. Instead of taking English, just a general literature course, I wanted, to have MFK Fisher books, or, Anthony Bourdain's books, or Julia Child's books be the books that they use for that. And there was a lot of pushback, honestly, from the school at the time, not the school itself, not leadership, but from the unions, unfortunately, that, you think that you're going to encroach on our areas. But I think if you want to improve the education for the students as a whole, contextualizing education gets the students to go through and actually be ready for the industry, rather than just to, have positions that are available to them. One of the best courses I ever took. So I had planned at one point to take the Certified Research Chef certification with RCA, and I failed it by one question. So I'll take it again someday. But the best course I took was it was food science for the non-food scientists. I took it at the Institute for Food Technologists conference, and we've also offered it through the RCA, and we plan on doing that eventually at at ACF conferences. And I want to build some online modules for it through our online learning center, so that people could take those courses. I think it just, we're continuously learning all the time, and as we go through it, and you get so many cuisines and different things, but we forget that it's important to understand why we cook the food that we cook, not just how to make money off of it. So that I think you get better at cooking everyday food. So that food science for the non-food scientist course will be something that I'm working on getting in for us, but also just promoting the courses the RCA offers as well, just in general, so that we get that relationship. There's a book that the RCA worked on called Culinology. There's a good book for people to pick up, and it's very much more approachable than some of the other books. And it's not, as you mentioned, behind you, a $400 book, set of books. It's just a little bit more approachable, and it does have a lot of food science in it, so it gets in there. But the way that it's explained is just easy to understand.
Yeah, that's really important because, like I said, there's a lot of really great books out there, but some of them can be a little intimidating, and the information can be very dense. And also a lot of it is, for someone like me, it's super interesting, but for a day-to-day chef, a lot of it's not going to really inform how they make decisions about how they cook stuff.
But think about how that fails though in the general education of a lot of the programs that require these gen ed the students go through the gen ed programs and have to take just a general chemistry course rather than something that's related to their industry, because it's going to be boring enough for them to take something that's contextualized, let alone something, because it's not, they go to culinary school because they want to learn how to cook. So if that food science course can help them to better understand why they cook the food the way they cook it, so that it comes out a different way, why that Maillard reaction happens, and you get the flavor profile, why you create that. We talk about that fifth sense of umami. Where do we get that flavor from? How do I create that, rather than just adding MSG to something? What is the kelp? I can add kelp. I can add mushrooms. I can add tomatoes. I can add cooking down tomatoes, especially, and sun-dried tomatoes give you some more of that. But you don't learn that just in a general cooking class, and I think that's if we can get to a point where we do accreditation obviously for schools here at the ACF. We also have apprenticeship programs. I find the future almost pushing more toward the apprenticeship program, because if more people just want to learn how to cook and get in the industry, that's where the apprenticeship programs really work really well for that. But I also feel that we miss out on the opportunities for a chef to want to be a culinarian, to want to become a food scientist, because they don't get to take that course. And I just wish we can get to a point where some of our educators, our schools, worry less about just getting someone into a bachelor's program and more so getting the student really ready to be able to do the career that they want to have.
So my food science course, I've really geared it to make it so a non-scientist can come in and take the course and kind of understand everything. And I do talk about food molecules and a lot of the more sciencey stuff, but I always relate it back to how chemistry happens in cooking and how we make decisions and what may cause this problem and how you fix it or how you detect this. And in the baking program at Seattle Central College, where I teach a real scaled down version of that for the baking students that's really a lot more applicable to what they're doing every day, but still has the science behind it. And I really would love to see more of that kind of stuff taught in more culinary schools, because that information is so important and it's not really that difficult to learn and understand. So I hope that the efforts of people like you, especially in the position that you're in, where you can really influence so many people and schools and education and the certifications that you have, will really help encourage that kind of learning and interest in those areas.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to do that, hopefully, bringing more of our like minds together and building, task force or committees that we can kind of come up with these ideas, and that we can bring them to the schools when we do our site visits. Say, hey, it's really so, because I think we've gotten to the point where now we've settled in the curriculum that we've recommended to be able to go for culinary hospitality, and then even recommending the restaurants and the business applications. But I think I'd love to get to the next level where we're saying, hey, we've also put together this program for you where here's a food science course for students in culinary, we really would love to talk to your science department and be able to help you to help the students to be more successful. So I think that that's another good step that we could work towards. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, we'll have to talk offline.
Yes, absolutely.
So, are there other areas that you'd like to talk about in terms of what you're trying to do with the ACF?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Charles Hayes and I are. Charles Hayes is the current president for RCA, and he's the one who really got me involved with the RCA. So he and I are talking about how do we get more opportunities besides just the traditional competitions that you've seen us do. So we have the 60-minute K categories where you do 4 portions of an entree. We've got our mystery baskets, but we're also talking about, so I used to chair the competitions that we had for the Research Chefs Association, so we're talking about how do we bring that partnership back together with ACF and RCA and maybe create some categories with the ACF to get students to do some food science culinary competitions as well. So we're going to be working on some of that. We're also going to work on how do we help the RCA to expand their certified research chef and certified culinary scientists through our program. So I just was going through for CECs, we have just around 3,000 certified executive chefs right now. We have about 200 certified chef de cuisine and about 500 certified sous chefs. There are 75, 80-ish certified research chefs with the RCA right now, but there are so many more that are in that industry. So we're talking about a partnership and how can we expand that for them, but also help us with the ACF too and our membership and giving more opportunities for them for certification in the realms of where they're doing their jobs. But we talked about other aspects of what those research chefs do. So some of them are in sales. So we're working on building some certificates for those culinary sales chefs that are out there as well. Some marketing background that goes into that and some of the other pieces. So there's just a lot of growth and momentum that I think will bring us to a new generation of culinarians that are different than we had in the past. So I joined back in 1997. We had 28,500 members. Our membership is about half of that right now, and it's because we haven't differentiated ourselves enough over the decades that have come since then. But I will tell you, in the year that I've been here, I appreciate what you said earlier about doing things differently being here, because I am looking at different avenues, and our team is looking at different avenues of how do we broaden our membership? How do we make our association, our federation, look more like the industry? So it's not just fine dining chefs that are out there in the industry. It is research chefs. It's chefs working in senior healthcare. We have chefs that are working in all different portions of the industry. We have kitchen managers. We don't work with chain accounts either. So if you look at some of the chain restaurants that are out there, there's a lot of food science that goes into that and a lot of commercial food manufacturing. But we've shunned that over the years because they're not fine dining chefs. But I'm looking at new opportunities to help them become part of the ACF and get certified in different areas, because we're looking to expand the certified culinary administrator to be a kitchen manager certification as well. So there's a lot of just new avenues that we'll be looking at to expand, but also just think about the demographics of the industry. You and I are middle-ish age white men.
Yes, thank you.
But through the years, a lot of the kitchens are much different than that. There's large Hispanic, Asian, Black community that's within our industry, and we've often hear people, "Hey, I have really great people working with us," but how did you help them to get into leadership positions and be more exposed to the industry? And that's more of the things we're going to be working on as well too, is working with our federation to make it look more like the industry, not just for the fact of looking at it, but how do we help get more people more. I hate the term getting a seat at the table, because just a seat at the table means you're just sitting there. I want to see more leaders at the table.
Those are some excellent points. As you know, I think a lot of people who were in the ACF in the past were in more traditional roles, as a line cook or a sous chef or a chef de cuisine or whatever. And the food industry is so broad, and there's so many people that I think an organization like the ACF can really help. And so rather than having these very narrow definitions of certifications and how the ACF can help people, if we can broaden that a little bit and really try to reach out to all those different types of people. And there's so many people I know. As you know, I'm on the board of directors of the Washington chapter of the ACF, and I know so many stories of people who the ACF has helped so much, and on the online forums, people tell stories. And so, it's really a great organization. I do think that we can do more, and I'm just so pleased that you're in there really thinking about these things and trying to move the organization forward to really help a much broader range of people.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking a little time today. Maybe we can talk a little bit more in the future. It's your second year anniversary about some of the changes that have been made. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we go?
I just, as I mentioned, leadership is going to be the big thing here. How do we become more leaders in the industry through our federation? We've been around 96 years as our anniversary now. So we will be around, I hope, for 196 years. I won't be here, neither one of us at that point, but I want to make sure I'm leaving the place better than I found it. And as the only way for anything of this to work, though, is for us to have these conversations, and I think for more people to come in and have the opportunity to contribute and be part of the solution too. So I often hear, well, what's in it for me? I said, well, you get out of it what you put into it. So the more that you're able to be part of the conversation and to build some of, so I talked about these task forces and building different pieces. As people hear this conversation, contact me, get a hold of me. Get a hold of board members, get a hold of your local chapter, and see how you can give back so that you can actually help build it together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Chef. I, again, really appreciate your time. And again, thank you for all the work that you've done.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.